Hello and welcome back to Water Matters. I am your host Jake, and today I am joined by Noonie from the GRAF team. How are you, Noonie?
Good, very good. Excited to be here today. Thanks, Jake.
And did you want to sort of explain more about who you are, what your role is within GRAF, and then we can go into obviously why that is related to our episode today?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Noonie from GRAF. I work in the technical department at GRAF. So we cover all things rainwater harvesting, wastewater treatment and firefighting in our department. Excited to start talking about sort of our wastewater treatment topic today.
Yes, and so that does lead into our topic, which is basically about wastewater infrastructure and catchment-based solutions. So obviously all things water matter to us in our homes, but one of the things is wastewater and how we can offset as much waste as possible in our water-based solutions. And so we're going to get into all the good questions today and pick your brain about those kind of things. But, yeah.
Sounds good.
Cool. So the first question is, why has wastewater become such an important planning issue with our homes?
So wastewater's actually always been equally as important. The thing we've got at the minute is that we've got aging infrastructure that was designed for much fewer people decades and decades ago. Couple that with the amount of people that we now have living across the UK, the infrastructure just isn't built for that. And if you then couple that with the strict environmental constraints that we have, and then we're facing here in the UK with river pollution and nutrient pollution, then we've really got quite a few things that we have to look at when we come to wastewater design, rather than kind of leaving that to the end of a development which served us well for a long period of time and isn't quite as suitable of a solution now.
And would you say that something has fundamentally changed within that over the past decade in terms of how we look at it?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously we're forever growing in the UK, so population, obviously our huge demand for housing now, so we've got really ambitious housing targets across the UK. Obviously where there's housing, there's wastewater disposal, and then again with our nutrient requirements in the UK, but also the increase of public desire around our sort of water quality for all of our waterways across the UK. People are kind of seeing that. We've seen that on the TV recently. We've seen that a lot in the news. And people are quite concerned with public health too. So not only are these requirements out there, but we've also got a much sort of stronger desire across the UK for the best solutions possible. We're also trying to design for sort of 50 to 100 years down the line. We don't want to be looking at solutions for, well, that'll do for now and we won't worry about it in the future sort of thing. So anything we can design that kind of is a little bit more bulletproof for the future, that's what we want to be looking at too.
So you obviously mentioned there expanding homes in general. We're obviously getting bigger as a country. We're trying to expand as much as possible with houses. Is this simply about building more homes, or would you say there's a deeper aspect here?
It's definitely not just about building the homes. In the UK we have climate increase, or across the globe we do, and with that comes really, really heavy rainfall events. We still have a lot of existing combined sewers across the UK. So anywhere where we see huge rainfall events, these are entering that same combined sewer. And then obviously we have risk of pollution as well downstream. So while we're not just designing for the quantity or the hydraulic flow of wastewater that's coming from these sites, we actually have to consider climate change and how we're dealing with that as a country as well, especially with combined sewers, because where we're not treating storm and waste separately, we really have to consider how they're going to work together combined.
And would this work in tandem with how developers are treating planning permissions with building houses, the fact that they're having to do it so much earlier, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important that it's done early as well, because the planning process is quite difficult, especially earlier we touched on the sort of environmental constraints we've got, nutrient pollution and things like this. So we're seeing lots of sort of planning applications still kind of on backlog, on hold, partly around frameworks, which are kind of slightly different council to council. But also, because we're looking at combined sewers, whether we can do something off-grid, what capacity we have in existing sewers, where that goes to eventually. Anyway, so it's a combination of things that we have to inclusively, consider in the design process, which is why it's so important that we're kind of talking about this at very early stages, getting everyone on board in that planning process. You want your water incumbent, involved in that. You want your planning officers, you want your developers, everyone involved in that process, so that it runs as smoothly as possible, and that you get your planning as quickly as possible, because with the ambitious sort of housing targets we've got and that we kind of need to get up and built, we don't really have space or time for backlog of planning applications as well.
One term I've heard thrown around quite a bit recently is a catchment-based solution. So I guess for myself and for the audience at home, what actually is a catchment and why is that important compared to an individual piece of infrastructure?
Yeah, so it's a really good question and actually a really important sort of design criteria. So essentially a catchment is any parcel of land that drains to the same water body, so that be it a river, a lake or a coastal water body. So that makes the catchment. So essentially it's really important that we do design for catchment-based solutions because we are eventually getting to that same water body. So if we sort of develop separately, if you and I are neighbours and you're building an agricultural farm and I'm building a housing development, but we're not considering that we're both of our runoff and both of our wastewater treatment is eventually making its way to the same catchment water body, then actually kind of poor design. So what we really want to do is design for the whole catchment and protect the whole water body in that catchment area. So that's what we're looking to do when we're designing catchment-based solutions.
Right, because I guess it's good if one person's managing their waste well, but then another person isn't, and it's still going to the same place. It ultimately sort of neutralises each other, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, especially with sort of nutrient pollution and things, we're still going to the same area. Our rainfall still ends up in the same riverbed. It's the exact same thing that we touched on with combined sewers. They're going to the same exit point eventually as well together. So yeah, it's really important to design for a catchment rather than individual sites, especially when we've got so many different types of developments that go on across the UK.
With that in mind, these catchment-based solutions, is it a new idea completely, or has it sort of been reworked from a previous idea? How new is this?
So the engineering principles themselves aren't actually new ideas. What's kind of new about it is that we are looking at this a lot sooner, a lot earlier. We're looking at these, like we say, for a longer design life, and trying to bring the right people around the table together early in the design stage. So yeah, more of an evolution rather than a revolution design.
And why does collaboration in an instance like this matter so much?
So essentially it's kind of like I'm trying to think of something to compare it to, like anything really, in that different people are responsible for different things. So you've got a developer, they know their site well, they know what they're trying to get built, they know the reasons for that, and then we've got the environmental regulators, so they know the environmental constraints for the area that wherever we're in, the water bodies we're talking about, and then you've got the planners as well, and obviously they know what the most sort of pressing planning concerns are for that area too. So we've got lots of different voices and lots of different very important, equally important requirements, but they just need to kind of come together conclusively at the very beginning of the process to really come up with the most suitable solution for the site.
So moving on to the more sort of in-depth engineering side of things, it's great to hear about all the teamwork and collaboration, but I guess there's a lot more to think about there. Does every new development still connect to that same public sewer system, or are there alternatives that need to be considered?
So a lot of developments do, yes, still connect to the standard public sewer system. If it's if it's not broken, don't fix it. There's still capacity in some areas, so absolutely a lot of developments still will connect to a public sewer. But we have a lot more options now for instances where that might not be feasible, or not even just to do with network capacity, but it might be to do with nutrient removal or something like that. So there's different designs for different constraints. And every development's different. So yes, a lot still connect to a public sewer, but there are lots of different solutions as well in place that mean that you can go off-grid, or a sort of hybrid approach where you might be partially off-grid or have a certain treatment in place that then does eventually make its way to a sewer. Might that be a combined sewer? So yeah, lots of different solutions really to choose from, but we still do have the network there that we can connect to sort of traditionally.
Good old-fashioned public sewer, yeah. And so in the really unique cases, where would the decentralised wastewater system fit into this?
Yeah, so decentralised systems are great for example, a rural setting, somewhere you might be quite a way away from a mains network, prevents you having to travel a great distance to connect onto a sewer, but also means that you can be kept completely off-grid. Obviously, we've got so many options now in the wastewater treatment industry. We can treat water to such a good standard. We have availability to discharge to ground. We have availability to discharge to water courses. So really, there's so many options there that in a rural setting, you don't have to be as close to a mains network as you perhaps used to be, or you don't have to have a sort of cesspool in the garden that eventually then needs emptied quite regularly.
So I guess looking at engineering overall, it's really less about immediately replacing all of the technology we have and actually trying to merge them together and find the right part that fits depending on where you are.
Yeah, exactly that. So what we're not looking is to choose a solution initially and design off it. What we're looking to do is look at the whole site, the whole catchment in its entirety, and then look at a solution or a combination of solutions that suit the requirements for that site best.
So moving on to more of the communal aspects here, obviously we've looked at all the engineering and everything, but you've got to think about the people too. If you were to start developing a new community for the first time, what considerations would you take into account?
A whole new community. Definitely early. I'd get everyone around the table earlier. We touched on it at the beginning of the podcast, but I think having all the right people there in the design process from the beginning. You need your sort of environmental regulators. You need to know what constraints you're designing to. You need your planners. You need to know what their priorities are, and obviously developers as well to know sort of what's feasible in their scope as well. So really getting everyone around the table early on. But then also looking to design, and again we touched on it earlier, but designing for as long a lifetime as possible. So we want to be looking to design for sort of 50, 100 years time. Sort of now solutions haven't ever served us very well, sort of immediate, that will do for now solutions kind of, they fail us quite quickly. So I think designing for the future is definitely something I'd be looking at if I was designing a community myself.
And so with that in mind, how would you say good or excellent planning could really benefit the community and the environment?
Yeah, so good planning ultimately enables a community to prove that it can grow sustainably. So we're proving sustainable growth. We're preventing any sort of extra pressures on existing infrastructure. Essentially, a wastewater treatment solution that you don't know about or don't hear about is one engineered well. So actually if people aren't talking about it and they don't really know about it and they're not really aware of sort of where that's going, that's probably a really well designed system. So actually that's a good sign for us. So a well engineered sort of wastewater treatment solution for a community is one that actually they don't talk about, and that's why that's good. That's a good solution. So we don't want to hear about any spillages or any overload or any sort of crazy. We don't want a television program because about it. And actually a well-engineered solution is probably one that the community isn't talking about, and it's protecting our environment. That's a huge one as well, to protect our waterways and our environment in better places for people and animals to live.
And so I guess if there was one thing that listeners would take away from this conversation we've had today and these questions that you've answered so brilliantly, what would that one thing be if there was really one point?
I think for me, planning. I think initial planning and doing that early is probably the biggest key takeaway for how you can kind of do this in the world today. Me personally, I'm all about sustainability and environmental concerns. So for me, a solution that protects the environment and the people that live in the area is the most important thing. But for anyone that's developing, I think it's really important that if you're trying to get something through planning, you really want to be getting those key issues and tick boxes sort of sorted early to prevent any delays and make sure that you've got sort of the most suitable and sustainable solution that you can have.
And I guess that works well for your key point that you like as well, which is the sustainability. If the planning is done well, the sustainability should follow in tandem that same way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not that our sort of existing infrastructure doesn't consider any of that. It's just the age of it and the fact that we have new solutions. We have different ways to treat different things. It just should definitely come up there. And it is generally, we're seeing that come a much higher priority in a lot of planning processes, which is great to see.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Noonie, for all of the information you have given us today. It's been amazing just finding out more about catchment-based solutions and how it is going to help with wastewater treatment in the future, and obviously just the general care of our waterways, of our lakes, our rivers, everything.
Thank you for having me.
And if you liked today's episode and you want to hear more about any water matters issues or solutions, please subscribe, follow us on our podcast platforms, and we will be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode. Thank you.